Victoria Hale built an empire by never letting anyone close. Adrian Cole barely survived each day with his daughter in his arms and dust on his boots. When their worlds collided in a single chaotic moment, a spilled coffee, a crying child, and one dangerous look that changed everything, neither of them knew the price they'd pay for wanting what they couldn't have. One mistake, one chance, one choice that would burn their lives down or build something neither dared to dream of. If you want to see where this story takes them, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this has reached. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Adrian Cole's alarm didn't go off that morning. It never did anymore. The phone was 3 years old and the battery barely held through the night. He woke instead to the sound of his daughter whimpering in the next room, her small voice cutting through the thin walls of their apartment like a blade. "Daddy?" He was on his feet before he was fully awake, stumbling over the work boots he'd left by the bed. The floor was cold. Everything in this place was cold. The linoleum, the water that barely got warm, the way sound traveled through every wall so you could hear Mrs. Patterson's television at all hours, and the couple upstairs who fought like it was a sport. Emma was standing in her crib, tears streaking her round cheeks, her hands reaching up the moment she saw him. Hey, I'm here." He scooped her up, and she buried her face in his shoulder, still half asleep, her small body trembling. "Bad dream?" She nodded against him. "It's okay. I got you." He rubbed her back, feeling the softness of her pajamas, the warmth of her. She smelled like the lavender soap he'd bought on sale last week. She was 2 years old, and already she knew how to break his heart just by needing him. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 6:47 a.m. He was supposed to be at the site by 7:30, which meant he was already behind. Childcare didn't start until 7:15, and the drive across town took 20 minutes if he got lucky with lights. "All right, baby girl, we gotta move." She whined as he set her down to change her diaper, her legs kicking in protest. He worked quickly, his hands rough and clumsy with the tiny snaps on her onesie. He'd gotten better at this over 2 years, but it still felt like defusing a bomb some mornings. By the time he had her dressed and strapped into the car seat, it was past 7. He threw on yesterday's jeans and a work shirt that smelled like sawdust and sweat, grabbed the diaper bag, and was out the door. The truck didn't start on the first try. Or the second. Come on! On the third, the engine turned over with a rattling cough, and he let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Emma was babbling in the back seat, playing with the stuffed rabbit he'd found at a thrift store. It was missing an eye, but she loved it. Traffic was heavier than usual. A fender bender on 5th had everything backed up, and by the time he got Emma to the daycare, it was 7:53. He signed her in, kissed her forehead, and ignored the look the woman at the desk gave him, the one that said he was late again, that he was barely keeping it together, that maybe he wasn't cut out for this. He made it to the site at 8:20. "Cole, you're late!" Dominic Torrens, the site foreman, was already storming over before Adrian even got out of the truck. Dom was built like a bulldog and had the temperament to match. He didn't care that Adrian was a single father. He didn't care about traffic or daycare or any of it. He cared about whether the drywall got up on time. "I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't frame a house." Dom jabbed a finger toward the half-finished structure behind him. "We're behind schedule, and I got the contractor breathing down my neck. You miss another morning, and I'm done making exceptions." Adrian nodded, jaw tight. "Won't happen again." "It better not." Dom walked off, muttering something Adrian didn't catch. He grabbed his tool belt from the truck bed and headed toward the site, his shoulders already aching. He hadn't even started yet, and he was exhausted. The day was brutal. The sun was out in full force by 9, beating down on them as they hauled lumber and hammered in beams. His hands were blistered by lunch, his back screaming by mid-afternoon. The other guys on the crew were friendly enough. Most of them were in the same boat, working long hours for not enough pay, trying to keep their heads above water. "You good, man?" Rico, one of the younger guys, tossed him a water bottle during a break. "Yeah, just tired." "You look like you haven't slept in a week." Adrian cracked a faint smile. "Try 2 years." Rico laughed. "Your kid's still waking up at night?" "Sometimes. She had a nightmare this morning." "Man, I don't know how you do it. I can barely take care of myself." Adrian didn't have a good answer for that. The truth was, he didn't know how he did it either. He just did. Because there wasn't another option. By the time 5 o'clock hit, his whole body was screaming. He clocked out, grabbed his stuff, and headed back to pick up Emma. She was playing in the corner of the daycare room when he arrived, her face lighting up the second she saw him. "Daddy!" He crouched down, and she ran into his arms, nearly knocking him over. "Hey, sweetheart, you have a good day?" She nodded, showing him a crayon drawing she'd made, mostly scribbles, but he could make out what might have been a sun in the corner. "That's beautiful. We'll put it on the fridge." They drove home through the early evening traffic, Emma humming to herself in the back seat. He made her dinner, mac and cheese from a box, apple slices, a cup of milk. She ate most of it, though half the noodles ended up on the floor. Bath time was a battle. Bedtime was worse. She didn't want to sleep, didn't want to be alone, clung to him even as her eyes drooped. "One more story, Daddy." "We already read 3. "Please?" He gave in. He always did. By the time she was finally asleep, it was past 9. He sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, too tired to move. This was his life. This was all it had been for 2 years. He thought about the dreams he used to have, back when he was younger, before Emma, before everything fell apart. He'd wanted to be an architect. He'd even started school for it, taken a few classes, sketched buildings in notebooks late at night. But then life happened. His girlfriend got pregnant. They tried to make it work. They didn't. She left when Emma was 6 months old, said she couldn't do it, couldn't be a mother, couldn't handle the weight of it. So Adrian became both. And the dreams got shelved. The notebooks got buried. The late-night sketches turned into late-night feedings, diaper changes, trying to figure out how to keep a tiny human alive on a construction worker's salary. He didn't regret it. Not for a second. But some nights, when the apartment was quiet and Emma was asleep, he felt the weight of everything he'd given up pressing down on him like a physical thing. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be the same. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until it wasn't. The next morning started the same way. Alarm that didn't go off, Emma crying, the scramble to get her dressed, and out the door. But this time, Adrian remembered he'd run out of coffee at home, and the idea of facing the day without caffeine felt impossible. There was a cafe a few blocks from the daycare. He'd passed it 100 times but never gone in. It was one of those sleek, expensive places with minimalist furniture and drinks that cost more than his lunch. But he was desperate. He parked, got Emma out of her seat, and carried her inside. The place was packed. Well-dressed people with laptops and designer bags crowded every table. The air smelled like espresso and something sweet he couldn't identify. He felt out of place immediately. His work clothes were stained, his boots were scuffed, and Emma had yogurt on her sleeve from breakfast. He got in line. Emma squirmed in his arms, grabbing at his shirt. "Daddy, down." "Not here, baby. Just a minute." The line moved slowly. The woman in front of him ordered something complicated, a oat milk latte with 2 pumps of vanilla and a shot of something he didn't catch. He tried not to think about how much it probably cost. When it was his turn, he ordered the simplest thing on the menu. Just a black coffee, large. The barista nodded and he stepped aside to wait. That's when it happened. He didn't see her at first. Didn't see the woman in the tailored black suit and heels moving through the crowded space with the kind of precision that suggested she didn't expect anyone to be in her way. Emma wriggled again, harder this time, and Adrian shifted his grip. His elbow knocked into something. The sound of liquid hitting the floor was immediate, sharp, wet, unmistakable. He turned. A woman stood frozen 2 feet away, her white blouse now drenched in coffee, the cup still in her hand, her expression caught somewhere between shock and fury. "I'm so sorry," Adrian started, his heart sinking. The woman's eyes snapped to him, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. She wasn't just beautiful. She was the kind of beautiful that didn't belong in real life. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled back in a perfect knot, eyes that were cold and cutting and the color of steel. Everything about her screamed money, power, control, and he'd just dumped coffee all over her. "Are you serious?" Her voice was low, clipped, each word like a blade. "I didn't see you. I'm sorry, Emma, sensing the tension, started to cry. The woman's gaze flicked to the child in his arms, and something in her expression shifted. Not softer exactly, but different. "Is she okay?" The question came out before she seemed to mean it, her eyes on Emma's tearful face. Adrian instinctively pulled his daughter closer. "She's fine. Look, I'm really sorry about your shirt. It's fine. The woman cut him off, her tone still cold but less sharp. She grabbed a napkin from the counter, dabbing uselessly at the stain spreading across her chest. Forget it. I can pay for the dry cleaning. I said forget it. She turned and walked toward the back of the cafe, her heels clicking against the tile with the kind of authority that made people move out of her way without thinking. Adrian stood there, Emma still sniffling against his shoulder, feeling like the entire room was staring at him. The barista handed him his coffee. He took it and left as quickly as he could. Victoria Hale had dealt with worse. Spilled coffee was nothing, an inconvenience, a minor disruption in an otherwise tightly controlled morning. She repeated that to herself as she stood in the cafe's single-stall bathroom, staring at the ruined blouse in the mirror. It was nothing, except it wasn't, because she couldn't stop thinking about the man who'd done it. The exhausted-looking guy with calloused hands and a crying toddler in his arms. The way he'd apologized like he expected her to destroy him. The way he'd held his daughter, instinctively protective, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Victoria didn't have time for distractions. She had a board meeting in 40 minutes, a conference call with Tokyo after that, and a merger negotiation that could make or break the next quarter. She didn't have time to think about some stranger in a cafe, but she did anyway. She dried off the blouse as best she could, threw on the blazer she'd left in the car, and headed to the office. The day was long. The board meeting ran over. The Tokyo call was a disaster. Half the projections were off, and the lead negotiator on their end clearly hadn't read the brief. By the time she got back to her office, her assistant had left 3 messages about a gala she was supposed to attend that weekend, and her head was pounding. Victoria sat at her desk, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. From up here, everything looked small, manageable, like pieces on a board she could move at will. It was a lie, of course. Control was an illusion. She knew that better than anyone. Her phone buzzed. A text from her brother. "You coming to dinner Sunday?" She typed back quickly. "Can't, working. You're always working." She didn't respond. Her brother didn't understand. None of them did. They thought running a billion-dollar company was about showing up to meetings and signing papers. They didn't see the late nights, the constant pressure, the way every decision carried the weight of thousands of jobs, millions of dollars, entire careers. They didn't see the cost. Victoria closed her eyes, rubbing her temples. When she opened them again, she saw him. The man from the cafe. He was across the street, getting out of a beat-up truck, a pink backpack slung over one shoulder. The same little girl was with him, holding his hand as they walked toward a building. Victoria watched without meaning to. He crouched down to tie the girl's shoe, his movements careful, patient. The girl said something, and he smiled, an expression so genuine it almost looked out of place in the middle of the crowded sidewalk. Then they disappeared inside. Victoria turned away from the window, her chest tight for reasons she didn't want to examine. It was nothing, just a stranger. She went back to work. Adrian didn't think about the woman from the cafe, or at least he tried not to, but she kept creeping into his thoughts at odd moments, while he was hammering in nails, while he was waiting for Emma to finish her lunch, while he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He didn't know why. She'd been cold, dismissive, clearly out of his league in every possible way. But there'd been something in her eyes when she looked at Emma, something almost human. He shook it off. It didn't matter. He'd never see her again, except he did. 3 days later, he was back at the same cafe. Different morning, same desperate need for caffeine. Emma was with him again, chattering about a cartoon she'd watched at daycare. He ordered his coffee, paid, and turned to leave. And there she was, standing by the window, phone in hand, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she looked away, back to her phone like he didn't exist. Adrian told himself to leave, to walk out the door and forget it. But something in him wouldn't let it go. He crossed the cafe, Emma still in his arms, his heart pounding for no reason he could name. "Hey." The woman looked up, surprise flickering across her face before it smoothed into that same cold mask. "Can I help you?" He hesitated. "I wanted to apologize again. For the other day." "I told you it was fine." "I know, but I felt bad about it." She studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp, assessing. "You don't need to feel bad." Still, Emma tugged on his collar. Daddy, go! The woman's eyes flicked to Emma, and again that same shift happened, something softer, almost imperceptible. How old is she? The question came out quieter than before. 2. The woman nodded slowly, like she was considering something she didn't want to say out loud. She's beautiful. Adrian blinked. Thank you. An awkward silence stretched between them. The woman's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, her expression tightening. I have to go. Right. Yeah, sorry for... Stop apologizing. She said it without malice, just tired, like she'd heard too many apologies in her life and didn't have room for another one. She walked past him toward the door. Adrian watched her go, feeling like he'd just missed something important. But then she stopped, turned back. What's your name? He blinked. Adrian. Adrian Cole. She nodded once, like she was filing it away. Victoria. And then she was gone. Cliché. Victoria didn't know why she'd asked his name. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. She didn't have time for this, whatever this was. But she couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he'd held his daughter, the way he'd apologized like he thought the world was waiting to punish him for the smallest mistake, the way he'd looked at her, not with the usual mix of intimidation and calculation she got from most people, but with something closer to curiosity. She hated it. She hated that it bothered her. That night, she had dinner alone in her penthouse apartment, takeout from a restaurant she couldn't remember the name of, eaten at the kitchen island while she answered emails. Her phone rang. Her brother again. She let it go to voicemail. Outside the window, the city glittered like a promise it never kept. Victoria set down her fork, her appetite gone. She thought about Adrian Cole, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his hands had looked rough and worn, the pink backpack slung over his shoulder. She thought about the life he must live. Small, ordinary, hard. And for just a moment, she wondered what that would feel like. To care about something more than the next deal, the next victory, the next move on the board. To care about someone the way he clearly cared about that little girl. Victoria pushed the thought away. It was dangerous, pointless. She went back to her emails. But the thought didn't leave. What? Adrian saw her again 2 weeks later. This time, it wasn't at the cafe. It was at the park, a small patch of green near Emma's daycare where he sometimes took her after pickup if the weather was nice. She loved the swings, and he loved watching her laugh, the sound cutting through all the weight he carried. He was pushing her gently, her legs kicking out with each arc, when he saw Victoria sitting on a bench 20 feet away. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at nothing, her phone in her lap, her expression distant. She looked lost. Adrian hesitated, then called out, Victoria? She turned, startled, and for a second he thought she might leave. But she didn't. Adrian. She said his name like she was testing it, like she wasn't sure it was real. He walked over, Emma still in the swing behind him, squealing for him to come back. You live around here? He asked. No, I was just... She trailed off, like she didn't have a good answer. Passing through. In a park? A faint smile tugged at her lips, almost against her will. Is that so strange? A little. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he felt something shift in the air between them. Your daughter's waiting, she said quietly. Adrian glanced back at Emma, who was leaning forward in the swing, waving her arms impatiently. Yeah, she's got no patience. She's 2. I don't think patience is in the job description. He laughed, surprised. You know a lot of 2-year-olds? No. Her voice softened. None, actually. There was something sad in the way she said it, something that made Adrian want to ask more, but he didn't. Instead, he said, You want to join us? She's not picky about her audience. Victoria hesitated, and then, to his shock, she stood up. All right. They spent an hour at the park. Victoria sat on the bench while Adrian pushed Emma on the swing, and then on the slide, and then chased her around the small patch of grass while she shrieked with laughter. Victoria watched. She didn't say much, but she didn't leave either. When Emma finally wore herself out, Adrian scooped her up and carried her back to the bench. The little girl's eyes were drooping, her head resting on his shoulder. She's exhausted, Victoria observed. She'll be asleep in 5 minutes. Do you do this every day? When I can. She likes being outside. Victoria nodded slowly, her gaze on Emma's small, peaceful face. You're good with her. I don't know about that. I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly. That's more than most people manage. There was a weight in her voice that Adrian didn't understand, but he felt it anyway. What do you do? He asked. For work, I mean. Victoria's expression closed off slightly. I run a company. What kind of company? The boring kind. She said it lightly, but he could tell she didn't want to talk about it. Fair enough. He shifted Emma's weight in his arms. I work construction. Also boring. I doubt that. You'd be surprised. They sat in silence for a moment, the evening light starting to fade around them. I should go, Victoria said eventually, standing up. Adrian stood too. Thanks for hanging out. I think Emma liked having someone new to show off for. Victoria's lips twitched. She's got a good father. The words landed harder than they should have, and Adrian didn't know how to respond. Victoria turned to leave, then paused. Do you come here often? To this park? A few times a week, usually around 6. She nodded, like she was filing that away too, and then she walked off into the twilight, disappearing down the path. Adrian stood there, holding his sleeping daughter, wondering what the hell had just happened. Victoria didn't plan to go back to the park, but she did. 3 days later. Then again the following week, she told herself it was nothing, just a place to clear her head, a break from the suffocating grind of work. But that was a lie. She went because she wanted to see him again. Adrian and his daughter. She went because something about them, about him, made the world feel less heavy, less cold. And that terrified her more than anything else. The 4th time Victoria showed up at the park, Adrian was ready for it. Not that he'd admit that to himself, but he'd started checking his watch around 5:30, making sure Emma's shoes were tied, that her hair wasn't too wild, that he didn't look like he'd just crawled out of a ditch after 10 hours on a construction site. It was stupid. Victoria Hale, whoever she really was, didn't care what he looked like. She probably didn't even think about him when she wasn't sitting on that bench watching Emma chase pigeons. But he thought about her. More than he should. She arrived at 6:15, walking down the path in a different suit, charcoal gray this time, still perfectly tailored, still completely out of place in a neighborhood park. She carried a coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other, but when she spotted him, she put the phone away. You're late, Adrian called out before he could stop himself. Victoria raised an eyebrow as she approached. I didn't realize we had an appointment. We don't, just never mind. She sat down on the bench, setting her coffee beside her. Emma was digging in the sandbox, her hands covered in grit, her face scrunched up in concentration as she filled a plastic bucket. She's very focused, Victoria observed. She gets that from me. Adrian sat down next to her, leaving a careful foot of space between them. When I was a kid, I used to build things out of Legos for hours, drive my mom crazy. What kind of things? Buildings, mostly. Skyscrapers, bridges, anything with structure. He paused. I wanted to be an architect. Victoria turned to look at him. Wanted? Yeah, past tense. What happened? Adrian watched Emma dump the bucket upside down, creating a lopsided sand tower. Life happened. Got a girl pregnant when I was 23, dropped out of school, started working construction to pay the bills. He shrugged, like it didn't matter, like it didn't still ache sometimes when he let himself think about it. Emma's mom left when she was 6 months old, so now it's just us. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. That must be hard. It is what it is. That's not an answer. He glanced at her, surprised by the sharpness in her voice. What do you want me to say? That it sucks? That some days I'm so tired I can't see straight, that I gave up everything I wanted because I had to? He stopped himself, shaking his head. Sorry, I don't usually... Don't apologize. Victoria's voice was softer now. You're allowed to be angry about it. I'm not angry. You should be. Adrian didn't know what to say to that. He looked back at Emma, who was now trying to climb out of the sandbox and failing spectacularly. What about you? He asked, changing the subject. You said you run a company. What kind? Victoria hesitated, like she was deciding how much to tell him. Technology, software development mostly, enterprise solutions. That sounds impressive. It's exhausting. How long have you been doing it? 8 years. I took over from my father when he retired. She picked up her coffee, staring into it like it held answers she didn't want to find. He built the company from nothing. I've been trying not to destroy it ever since. I'm sure you're doing fine. You don't know that. No, Adrian admitted, but you don't seem like someone who fails at things. Victoria's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile if it had any warmth in it. I fail at plenty of things. I'm just better at hiding it than most people. Emma came running over then, her hands filthy, her smile wide. Daddy, look! She held up a rock she'd found, like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Wow, that's a good one, Adrian said, taking it from her and pretending to examine it closely. Very shiny. For you? For me? I'm honored. Emma beamed, then turned her attention to Victoria, staring at her with the unfiltered curiosity only a 2-year-old could manage. Who you? Victoria blinked, clearly caught off guard. I'm Victoria. Victoria? Close enough. Emma climbed up onto the bench between them, her sandy hands leaving prints on Adrian's jeans. You pretty. Victoria's expression shifted, something cracking in the careful mask she wore. Thank you. You want rock? Victoria looked at Adrian, helpless. She's offering you a treasure, Adrian said quietly. It's a big deal. Emma held out another rock, smaller than the first, her eyes wide and expectant. Victoria took it carefully, like she was handling something fragile. It's beautiful. Thank you, Emma. Emma grinned and scrambled back down, running off to find more rocks. Victoria stared at the stone in her palm, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. You okay? Adrian asked. Yeah. She closed her hand around the rock. I'm fine. She wasn't, he could tell, but he didn't push. They sat in silence until Emma got bored of the sandbox and demanded to go home. Adrian stood, brushing sand off his jeans, and Victoria stood with him. Same time next week? He asked, not sure why he was asking, not sure what he wanted the answer to be. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and he felt something shift in his chest. Yeah, she said quietly. Same time. She walked away, slipping the rock into her pocket. Adrian watched her go, Emma tugging on his hand, and wondered what he was getting himself into. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She lay in her penthouse bed, staring at the ceiling, the rock Emma had given her sitting on the nightstand beside her. It was just a rock. Gray. Ordinary. Worthless. But she couldn't stop looking at it. She couldn't stop thinking about the way Emma had smiled at her, the way Adrian had talked about his daughter like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, the way he'd looked when he mentioned giving up architecture. Victoria had given up things too. More than she could count. Relationships that didn't fit into her schedule. Hobbies that took time away from work. The possibility of a family, of children, of anything resembling a normal life. She'd made those choices willingly, strategically. She'd never regretted them. Until now. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from her assistant reminding her about the investor meeting in the morning. Victoria ignored it. She picked up the rock instead, turning it over in her hand. It was smooth, worn down by time and water. Simple. Honest. Everything her life wasn't. She set it back down and closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Bullshit. The investor meeting was a disaster. Not because Victoria wasn't prepared, she was always prepared, but because her mind kept drifting, kept circling back to the park, to Adrian, to the way he'd looked at her when she'd said she failed at things too. Ms. Hale? She blinked, realizing the entire boardroom was staring at her. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Jonathan Pierce, the lead investor, leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. I asked if you've reviewed the Q3 projections. Of course. She pulled up the report on her tablet, rattling off numbers and forecasts from memory. The investors nodded, satisfied, and the meeting moved on. But Victoria could feel Pierce watching her, his gaze sharp and assessing. When the meeting ended, he approached her as she was gathering her things. Victoria, a word? She looked up, forcing a neutral expression. Of course. They stepped into her private office, and Pierce closed the door behind them. You seem distracted today. he said, not bothering with pleasantries. I wasn't. Don't lie to me. I've known you since you were a kid. Pierce was her father's oldest friend, one of the first investors when the company was still operating out of a garage. He'd earned the right to speak to her like this, even if she hated it. What's going on? Victoria sat down behind her desk, buying herself time. Nothing. I've just been working a lot. You're always working. That's never been a problem before. She didn't answer. Pierce studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You know, your father used to do the same thing. Get so caught up in the company that he forgot to live. It nearly destroyed him. I'm not my father. No, you're worse. He said it without malice, just a statement of fact. At least he knew when to step back. You don't. Victoria's jaw tightened. If that's all, it's not. Pierce sat down across from her. There's a gala next month. Major donors, potential partners, the whole circus. You're expected to attend. I'll be there. With a date. Victoria's stomach sank. That's not necessary. It is if you want these people to see you as more than a robot in a suit. Pierce leaned forward. You're brilliant, Victoria, but you're also intimidating. People don't trust what they can't relate to. Showing up with someone, anyone, makes you human. I don't need to be human to run this company. Maybe not. But you need to be human to keep the investors happy. And right now, they're starting to wonder if you're capable of anything beyond profit margins. He stood. Think about it. Find someone to bring. It doesn't have to mean anything. Just do it. He left. Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at the city through the window, and thought about Adrian. It was a terrible idea, the worst idea she'd had in years. But she couldn't shake it. What? Adrian was replacing a section of drywall when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer. He was covered in dust. His hands were shaking from holding the drill for too long. And he was pretty sure Dom would lose his mind if he saw him on a personal call during work hours. But the number wasn't one he recognized, and something made him pick up. Hello? Adrian, it's Victoria. He nearly dropped the phone. Victoria, hi. How did you... You gave me your number last week at the park. He had no memory of doing that, but he must have, because here she was, calling him. Right. Yeah, sorry. I'm at work. It's kind of loud. I won't keep you. Her voice was clipped, professional, like she was reading from a script. I have a favor to ask. Adrian stepped away from the noise, heading toward the edge of the site. Okay. There's an event next month. A gala. I need someone to accompany me. He waited for the punchline. It didn't come. You're serious? Yes. Why me? Because you're the only person I know who won't try to leverage it into a business opportunity. She paused. And because I trust you. Adrian leaned against a stack of lumber, his mind racing. Victoria, I don't even own a suit. I'll take care of that. And Emma, bring a babysitter. I'll cover the cost. This is insane. I know. For the first time, her voice softened. But I'm asking anyway. Adrian closed his eyes, trying to think of a single good reason to say no. He couldn't find one. When is it? October 15th, 7 p.m. I'll have to check if I can get someone to watch Emma. Let me know by the end of the week. Okay. There was a pause, and then Victoria said quietly, Thank you. She hung up before he could respond. Adrian stood there staring at his phone, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. The week passed in a blur. Adrian asked around for babysitters, finally finding a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson from downstairs, who was retired and loved Emma, willing to watch her for the night. He texted Victoria the confirmation, and she replied with an address and a time for a suit fitting. When the day came, Adrian left work early, picked up Emma from daycare, and drove across town to an address that turned out to be a high-end tailor shop, the kind of place he'd never even walked past, let alone gone inside. A woman in a crisp white shirt greeted him at the door. Adrian Cole? That's me. Miss Hale is waiting for you. She led him through the shop to a private room in the back. Victoria was already there, standing by a rack of suits, her expression focused as she examined the fabric of a jacket. She looked up when he entered. You made it. Barely. He glanced around, taking in the leather chairs, the mahogany paneling, the quiet elegance of it all. This place is... Expensive. I know. She gestured to the rack. Pick whichever one you like. They'll tailor it to fit. Adrian walked over, running his hand along the sleeve of a charcoal suit. The fabric was softer than anything he'd ever touched. I can't afford this. I told you, I'm covering it. Victoria. Adrian. She stepped closer, her voice firm. You're doing me a favor. Let me do this. He wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. Okay. The fitting took an hour. The tailor measured him, pinned the suit, made adjustments while Adrian stood stiffly, feeling like an imposter. Victoria watched the whole time, occasionally offering input, shorter hem, slimmer cut, her tone businesslike but not unkind. When it was done, Adrian caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the man staring back. You look good, Victoria said quietly. I look like I'm pretending to be someone else. Maybe that's not a bad thing. He turned to look at her. Do you ever get tired of pretending? Victoria's expression flickered, and for a moment he thought she might answer honestly. But then the mask slipped back into place. All the time, she said, so softly he almost didn't hear it. They left the shop together, stepping out into the late afternoon sun. Emma was asleep in her stroller, her face peaceful, her hand clutching the stuffed rabbit. Thank you, Adrian said, for the suit, for all of this. Don't thank me yet. You haven't survived the gala. That bad? Worse. She smiled faintly. But you'll be fine. How do you know? Because you're not like them. And that's exactly why I asked you. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the city crowd. Adrian stood there, Emma still asleep beside him, and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. Book. The gala was 3 weeks away, and Adrian couldn't stop thinking about it. He kept going to the park, kept meeting Victoria on that same bench, kept watching Emma play while they talked about nothing and everything. She told him about the company, careful, vague details that painted a picture of pressure and expectation and loneliness. He told her about the construction site, about Emma's new obsession with dinosaurs, about the way his back ached every morning and he couldn't remember the last time he'd slept more than 5 hours. They didn't talk about the gala. It hung between them like an unspoken promise, something neither of them wanted to examine too closely. But it was there. One evening, as the sun dipped low and Emma chased fireflies across the grass, Victoria said, You don't have to do this, you know. Adrian looked at her. Do what? Come to the gala. If it's too much. It's not. You don't even know what you're walking into. Then tell me. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. It's a room full of people who measure worth in dollar signs and connections. They'll look at you and see someone who doesn't belong. They'll question why you're there, what you want, whether you're using me for something. Are they wrong? She turned to him, her eyes sharp. Are they? No? He said it simply, without hesitation. I'm there because you asked. That's it. Victoria's expression softened, and for a moment she looked almost vulnerable. Why did you say yes? Adrian considered the question. He could have given her a dozen answers, because he was curious, because he wanted to help, because he didn't know how to say no to her. But the truth was simpler than that. Because I wanted to, he said. Victoria held his gaze, and something passed between them, something neither of them was ready to name. Then Emma came running over, a firefly cupped in her small hands, and the moment broke. The night of the gala arrived faster than Adrian expected. He dropped Emma off at Mrs. Patterson's apartment, ignoring the older woman's knowing smile as she took the diaper bag and promised to call if anything went wrong. Emma clung to him for a moment, her small arms wrapped around his neck. Be good, okay? He murmured. Okay, Daddy. He kissed her forehead and left before he could change his mind. The suit felt strange on him, too formal, too tight, like a costume he wasn't meant to wear. He drove to the address Victoria had given him, a hotel in the heart of the city, and pulled up to the valet stand feeling completely out of place. A young guy in a red vest took his keys without comment, and Adrian walked through the towering glass doors into the lobby. It was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting light off polished marble floors. People in tuxedos and evening gowns moved through the space like they belonged there, their laughter sharp and practiced. Adrian stood frozen, scanning the crowd for Victoria. and then he saw her. She was standing near the entrance to the ballroom, talking to a man in a gray suit. She wore a dress, deep navy, sleek and elegant, cut in a way that made her look untouchable. Her hair was down for the first time since he'd met her, falling in dark waves over her shoulders. She was stunning. Adrian's breath caught, and for a moment he forgot how to move. Then she looked up and saw him. Her expression shifted, surprise, relief, something else he couldn't name. She excused herself from the conversation and crossed the lobby toward him. "You came," she said, and there was something in her voice that made his chest tighten. "I said I would." "I know, I just—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "You look good." "So do you." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Come on, let's get this over with." She led him into the ballroom, and Adrian felt every eye in the room turn toward them. The ballroom was massive, high ceilings, gold accents, tables draped in white linen and topped with elaborate floral arrangements. A live band played soft jazz in the corner, and waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Adrian had never felt more out of place in his life. Victoria guided him through the crowd, her hand resting lightly on his arm. People greeted her as they passed, polite smiles, calculated nods, the kind of interactions that felt more like chess moves than conversations. "Smile," she murmured. "You look like you're being led to your execution." "I feel like I am." "You're doing fine." They reached a table near the front, and Victoria introduced him to the people already seated, investors, board members, people whose names Adrian immediately forgot. They shook his hand, asked polite questions about what he did, and he could see the judgment in their eyes when he said construction. One man, silver-haired, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, leaned back in his chair and studied Adrian with open curiosity. "So, Adrian, how did you and Victoria meet?" Adrian glanced at Victoria, who was watching him carefully. "At a cafe. I spilled coffee on her." The man laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How charming." "It wasn't," Victoria said coolly, but he apologized. Most people don't. The man's smile tightened, and he turned his attention back to his drink. The evening dragged on. Adrian sat through speeches about philanthropy and innovation, picked at food he couldn't pronounce, and tried not to notice the way people stared at him like he was a curiosity. Victoria stayed close, her presence a steadying force, but even she seemed tense. At one point she leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for doing this." "You've said that already." "I know, I just—" She hesitated. "I mean it." He looked at her, and for a moment the noise of the room faded. "I know," he said quietly. Then someone called Victoria's name, and the moment was gone. The real trouble started during the auction. It was for charity. Expensive art pieces and vacation packages being bid on by people with more money than sense. Adrian watched in disbelief as a painting of a single blue line sold for $50,000. Victoria bid on a few items, her paddle raised with casual authority, and won a weekend at a resort in the mountains. She didn't seem particularly excited about it. Then a voice cut through the room, loud and sharp. "Victoria, I didn't expect to see you here with a date." Adrian turned to see a man approaching their table, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of smile that set Adrian's teeth on edge. Victoria's expression went cold. "Marcus? It's been a while." Marcus looked at Adrian, his gaze openly dismissive. "And who's this?" "Adrian Cole," Adrian said, standing and offering his hand. Marcus shook it, his grip too tight, too long. "Marcus Delwood. I work with Victoria. Or I did, before she pushed me out." "That's not what happened," Victoria said, her voice sharp. "Isn't it?" Marcus smiled. "But that's ancient history. I'm more interested in your new friend here. What do you do, Adrian?" "Construction." Marcus's smile widened. "Construction. How grounded." "Tell me, how does someone like you end up at an event like this?" "Victoria invited me." "Of course she did." Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping just low enough that only Adrian could hear. "Word of advice. Don't get too comfortable. Women like Victoria don't date down. They use people like you to make themselves look charitable. Once they're done, they move on." Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Victoria stood. "That's enough, Marcus. I'm just being honest. You're being an ass. Leave." Marcus held up his hands in mock surrender. Fine. Enjoy your evening. He looked at Adrian one last time. Good luck. You'll need it. He walked away, and Adrian could feel the eyes of the room on them. Victoria sat down, her hands clenched in her lap. I'm sorry, he's an ex? A mistake. She looked at him, her eyes filled with something that might have been regret. I should have warned you. This was a bad idea. Why? Because people like him think I don't belong here? Because they're going to make your life hell for being with me. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his anger simmering. Let them. Victoria stared at him, and for the first time all night she looked genuinely surprised. You mean that? Yeah, I do. She didn't say anything, but something in her expression shifted, softened, and for the rest of the night she didn't leave his side. They left the gala just after midnight, stepping out into the cool night air. Adrian's head was spinning, his chest tight with anger and frustration, and something he didn't want to name. Victoria walked beside him in silence, her heels clicking against the pavement. When they reached the valet stand, she stopped. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what? For putting you through that. For everything. Adrian turned to face her, and in the glow of the streetlights, she looked smaller somehow, more human. You didn't put me through anything, he said. I chose to be there. Why? Her voice cracked, just a little. Why would you choose this? Adrian didn't have a good answer, or maybe he did, and he just wasn't ready to say it out loud. So instead, he said, Because you asked. Victoria looked at him, and he could see the walls she'd built around herself starting to crack. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? This. Whatever this is. Adrian stepped closer, closing the space between them. Neither do I. They stood there, the city humming around them, and for the first time, Adrian let himself admit what he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. He was falling for her. And judging by the way Victoria was looking at him, she was falling too. The valet brought Adrian's truck around, and the kid's eyes widened slightly at the contrast between the beat-up vehicle and the gleaming luxury cars lined up behind it. Adrian didn't care. He took the keys, opened the passenger door for Victoria, and watched as she hesitated. I can call a car, she said. Get in. She did. They drove in silence through the empty streets, the city lights blurring past the windows. Adrian's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his mind still replaying Marcus's words, the way people had looked at him all night like he was something they'd scraped off their shoes. Turn left here, Victoria said quietly. He did, following her directions until they pulled up outside her building, a towering glass structure that probably cost more per month than he made in a year. The doorman stood at attention, his expression neutral as Victoria stepped out. She paused, one hand on the door. Do you want to come up? Adrian's heart kicked against his ribs. I should get back. Emma, I know, She stopped, looking frustrated with herself. Never mind. Victoria. She turned back. I had a terrible time tonight, he said, but I'd do it again. Something flickered in her eyes. Relief, maybe, or something deeper. Why? Because you were there. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, and then she did something he didn't expect. She leaned back into the truck and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. But it was real. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. Good night, Adrian. She was gone before he could respond, disappearing through the glass doors into the lobby. Adrian sat there, his lips still tingling, his heart racing, and realized he was completely screwed. He drove home in a daze, picked up a sleeping Emma from Mrs. Patterson's apartment, and carried her upstairs. She didn't wake as he tucked her into bed, her small body curling around the stuffed rabbit. Adrian sat on the edge of the couch, still in the suit, and touched his fingers to his mouth. Victoria Hale had kissed him, and he had no idea what to do about it. The next morning, Adrian's phone rang while he was making Emma breakfast. She was in her high chair, smearing oatmeal across the tray with the kind of focus that suggested she was creating modern art. He answered without checking the caller ID. Hello? It's me. Victoria's voice was quieter than usual, almost uncertain. Hey, Adrian said, his pulse quickening. I shouldn't have done that. Last night, I wasn't thinking. The words hit him harder than they should have. Okay. It's not that I didn't want to, things are complicated right now, and I don't want to drag you into something you're not ready for. Victoria, I'm a grown man. I can decide what I'm ready for. Can you? Her voice sharpened. Because the people at that gala, that was nothing. Wait until they find out we're actually seeing each other. Wait until they start digging into your life, your past, everything about you. They'll use it against me, against us. Let them. You say that now. I mean it. Adrian set down the spoon he'd been holding, his frustration rising. I'm not scared of them. I'm not scared of you. Silence on the other end. You should be, Victoria said finally. I ruin everything I touch. I don't believe that. You don't know me well enough. Then let me. More silence. Then so quietly he almost missed it. Okay. They started seeing each other in small ways after that. Coffee before work, when Victoria would show up at the cafe near Emma's daycare and sit with them for 20 minutes before disappearing into her world of board meetings and conference calls. Evenings at the park, where Emma had started calling Victoria Toria without hesitation and would drag her around to look at bugs and flowers. Once, Victoria showed up with a children's book about constellations, and Emma made Adrian read it 4 times in a row while Victoria watched with something that looked almost like longing. It wasn't normal. It wasn't easy. But it was real. Adrian didn't tell anyone at the construction site. He knew what they'd say. That he was in over his head, that women like Victoria didn't end up with guys like him, that he was setting himself up to get hurt. He could already hear Dom's voice in his head, rough and skeptical, telling him to focus on his kid and stop chasing fantasies. But it didn't feel like a fantasy. Not when Victoria texted him in the middle of the day just to ask how Emma was doing. Not when she laughed at something stupid he said, and the sound was so genuine it made his chest ache. Not when she looked at him like he was the only person in the world who understood her. 3 weeks after the gala, Victoria invited him to her apartment for dinner. Just dinner, she said over the phone. Nothing fancy. I'll order something. Adrian hired Mrs. Patterson again, dropped Emma off with a bag full of toys and snacks, and drove to Victoria's building with his stomach in knots. The doorman recognized him this time and waved him through without question. Adrian took the elevator to the top floor, the numbers climbing higher than he'd ever been in a building, and stepped out into a private hallway. Victoria opened the door before he could knock. She was wearing jeans, actual jeans, paired with a soft sweater that made her look younger, less guarded. Her hair was loose, and she wasn't wearing any makeup that he could see. Hi, she said. Hi. She let him inside, and Adrian tried not to stare at the apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, the lights stretching out like stars. The furniture was sleek and expensive, the kind of thing he'd only seen in magazines. Everything was pristine, perfectly arranged, almost sterile in its perfection. This is... wow, he said. It's too much. Victoria closed the door behind him. I know. I didn't say that. You were thinking it. Adrian turned to look at her. I was thinking it's lonely. Victoria's expression faltered. Yeah, it is. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the admission hanging between them. Then Victoria cleared her throat and gestured toward the kitchen. I ordered Thai. I hope that's okay. That's perfect. They ate at the kitchen island, the food spread out in containers between them. Victoria asked about Emma, about work, about the things that filled Adrian's days. He asked about the company, about the pressure she carried, about the things she never talked about at the park. I took over from my father when I was 22, Victoria said, picking at her pad thai with a fork. He had a heart attack. Not fatal, but bad enough that the board started panicking. He told me I had 6 months to prove I could handle it, or he'd sell. That's brutal. He didn't think I could do it. No one did. She set down the fork, her expression distant. I worked 16-hour days for a year straight, missed birthdays, holidays, everything. Cut people out of my life because they were distractions. Turned myself into someone I barely recognized. Did it work? Depends on how you measure success. She looked at him. The company's worth 5 times what it was when I took over. But I don't have anyone. No real friends. No family I actually talk to. Just work. That's not true. Isn't it? You have me, Adrian said. And Emma. Victoria's eyes filled with something he couldn't name. For now. What's that supposed to mean? It means people leave, Adrian. They always do. He reached across the counter and took her hand. I'm not going anywhere. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. She stared at him, and then she pulled her hand away, standing abruptly. You should see the view. Adrian followed her to the windows, and they stood side by side, looking out at the city. It was beautiful, overwhelming, too big to hold in his mind all at once. I used to love this, Victoria said quietly. Standing here, feeling like I was on top of the world. Now it just feels like I'm floating. You're not floating. Adrian turned to face her. You're right here. Victoria looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her expression nearly broke him. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Let someone in. Adrian stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek. You're already doing it. And then he kissed her. This time it wasn't tentative. It wasn't uncertain. It was everything they'd been holding back, all the fear and longing and need crashing together in a way that felt like falling and flying at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria's hands were fisted in his shirt, her breathing uneven. Stay, she said. I can't. Emma, I know, but stay a little longer. So he did. They ended up on the couch, Victoria curled against him, her head on his chest. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. For the first time in what felt like forever, Adrian let himself just exist in the moment, feeling the warmth of her, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the way she fit against him like she was always meant to be there. It was past midnight when he finally left, and Victoria walked him to the door. Thank you, she said. For what? For not running. Adrian kissed her forehead. I told you. I'm not going anywhere. He meant it, but the universe had other plans. The article came out 2 days later. Adrian didn't see it at first. He was on the construction site hammering in support beams when Rico came over with his phone. Dude, is this you? Adrian wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the screen. It was a photo from the gala. Him and Victoria, standing close, her hand on his arm. The headline read, Tech CEO. Victoria hails mystery man. Who is Adrian Cole? His stomach dropped. Where did you get this? It's everywhere, man. Twitter, Instagram, some gossip site. People are going crazy trying to figure out who you are. Adrian scrolled through the article, his chest tightening with every word. They dug into his life, his age, his job, the fact that he was a single father. There were photos of him leaving the daycare with Emma, grainy and clearly taken without his knowledge. The tone was mocking, questioning what a billionaire CEO was doing with a blue-collar nobody. Holy shit, Rico said. You're dating Victoria Hale? It's complicated. Complicated? Dude, she's worth like $1 billion. How is that complicated? Adrian didn't answer. He just kept scrolling, his anger building with every line. Then he got to the comments. He's obviously using her for money. She can do so much better. What does she see in him? He looks like he just crawled out of a ditch. Gold digger. Adrian shoved the phone back at Rico and walked away, his hands shaking. Dom found him 10 minutes later, leaning against the side of the truck, trying to breathe through the rage. Cole, you good? No. Dom crossed his arms, his expression hard. You gonna tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess? Adrian handed him his phone, the article still open. Dom read it, his face darkening. You're dating her? Yeah. And you didn't think to mention this? It's my personal life. It's got nothing to do with work. Except now it's plastered all over the internet and people are going to be talking about it. Dom sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Look, I don't care who you're seeing, but this is going to make your life hell. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you just painted a target on your back. People are going to come after you. They're going to question everything about you, why she's with you, what you want from her, whether you're good enough. And let me tell you something, Cole. Most people are going to say you're not. Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't care what people think. You should. Because it's not just you anymore. You've got a kid. What happens when they start showing up at the daycare? When they start taking pictures of Emma? The thought made Adrian's blood run cold. They wouldn't. They already did. Dom pointed at the phone. You think those pictures of you and your daughter happened by accident? Someone followed you, Cole, and they're going to keep following you as long as you're with her. Adrian felt like the ground was falling out from under him. I need to talk to her. Yeah, you do. Whooped. Vic's building. A polished woman in her 30s with a headset and a clipboard, standing between him and the elevator like a guard dog. I'm sorry, Mr. Cole, but Miss Hale is in meetings all day. Tell her I'm here. She'll want to see me. The assistant hesitated, then spoke quietly into her headset. A moment later, her expression shifted. 10th floor. Her office is at the end of the hall. Adrian took the elevator up, his heart pounding. The 10th floor was all glass and steel, people in expensive suits moving through the space with purpose. He felt every eye on him as he walked toward the corner office, his boots loud on the polished floor. Victoria's door was open. She was standing by the window, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice clipped and professional. I don't care what they're saying. We're not issuing a statement. She turned and saw him. I'll call you back. She hung up and crossed the room, closing the door behind him. Adrian, I was going to call you. Did you see it? His voice came out harsher than he meant. Yes. Did you know they were following me? No, I swear I didn't know. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, pacing the length of her office. They have pictures of Emma. Someone was at her daycare, Victoria. Taking pictures of my kid. Victoria's face went pale. I'll have my security team look into it. We'll find out who... That's not the point. Adrian turned on her, his frustration boiling over. The point is that this is happening because of you. Because I was stupid enough to think we could do this without consequences. Victoria flinched like he'd slapped her. I never asked you to... You did. You asked me to go to that gala. You asked me to get involved in your world. And now my daughter's face is on the internet because of it. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Adrian. I never wanted this, but it's happening. And I don't know how to protect her from it. They stood there, the silence heavy and suffocating. What do you want me to do? Victoria asked quietly. Adrian looked at her, and the exhaustion hit him all at once. I don't know. Do you want me to end this? Because I will. If it keeps you and Emma safe, I'll walk away right now. The offer should have been a relief. It should have been exactly what he wanted. But it wasn't. No, he said. I don't want that. Then what? I want you to fight for this. For us. The way I'm fighting for it. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, and she crossed the room, taking his hands in hers. I am fighting for it, every single day, but I don't know if that's enough. Adrian pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she broke. She cried against his chest, her shoulders shaking, all the walls she'd built around herself crumbling in the safety of his arms. And Adrian held her, because it was the only thing he knew how to do. We'll figure it out, he murmured into her hair. Okay? We'll figure it out. She nodded, but neither of them believed it. The backlash got worse before it got better. The media ran with the story, painting Adrian as a gold digger, an opportunist, someone using Victoria for her money and status. His phone blew up with messages from people he hadn't talked to in years, some supportive, most just curious. Reporters started showing up at the construction site, asking questions, trying to get a statement. Dom banned them from the property, but it didn't stop them from waiting outside. Adrian stopped going to the park. He stopped taking Emma anywhere public. Mrs. Patterson agreed to watch her more often, and Adrian hated himself for it, for letting fear dictate his life, for letting Victoria's world bleed into his daughter's. Victoria hired security. A quiet man named Hayes who started following Adrian at a distance, making sure no one got too close. Adrian hated that too, hated feeling like he needed protection, like he couldn't take care of himself or his kid. But the worst part was the silence. Victoria stopped calling as much. Their texts became shorter, less frequent. She was drowning in damage control, trying to keep the story from affecting the company, fielding calls from investors who were suddenly nervous about her judgment. Adrian understood, but it didn't make it hurt less. 2 weeks after the article dropped, they finally saw each other again. Victoria showed up at his apartment late one night, her eyes red-rimmed, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. I miss you, she said, standing in his doorway. I miss you too. She stepped inside and Adrian closed the door behind her. Emma was asleep in the next room, her soft breathing the only sound in the apartment. Victoria looked around, at the mismatched furniture, the toys scattered across the floor, the crayon drawings taped to the fridge. This is your life. Yeah. It's beautiful. Adrian almost laughed. It's a mess. It's real. She turned to face him. My life isn't real, Adrian. It's all performance, all strategy. But this, you and Emma, this is the only thing that's ever felt real to me. Then don't let them take it from us. I'm trying. Her voice broke. But I don't know how to fight this. I don't know how to make them stop. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in the dim light of his tiny apartment, holding each other like it was the only thing keeping them afloat. We'll figure it out, he said again, and this time he almost believed it. But the storm was far from over, and the worst was yet to come. The tipping point came in the form of a phone call. Adrian was at work, halfway through replacing a rotted window frame, when his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Is this Adrian Cole? Who's asking? My name is Jennifer Rains. I'm a reporter with the Tribune. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Victoria Hale. Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. No comment. I understand you're a single father. How do you reconcile raising a child on a construction worker's salary with dating one of the wealthiest women in the country? I said, no comment. There are rumors that Ms. Hale is financially supporting you. Can you confirm or deny? Adrian hung up. His hands were shaking. He shoved the phone in his pocket and tried to go back to work, but the anger was building, hot and sharp, making it impossible to focus. Rico noticed. You good, man? No. Was that another reporter? Yeah. What did they want? Adrian didn't answer. He just grabbed his tool belt and walked off the site. He called Victoria from the truck. She answered on the second ring. Adrian? They're calling me now, reporters, asking about money, about Emma, about us. I'll handle it. How? You can't control what they say. You can't stop them from, I'll figure it out. That's what you keep saying. Adrian's voice rose, his frustration spilling over. But it's not getting better, Victoria. It's getting worse. And I don't know how much more of this I can take. Silence on the other end. Are you saying you want to end this? Her voice was small, fragile. I'm saying I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to protect my daughter and be with you at the same time. Then don't. The words came out flat, defeated. Don't be with me. It's easier that way. That's not what I want. But it's what you need. Adrian closed his eyes, his chest aching. Victoria, I have to go. I'm sorry, Adrian, for all of it. She hung up. Adrian sat in the truck, staring at the phone in his hand, and felt the weight of everything crashing down on him. He didn't know what to do, but he knew he couldn't lose her. Not like this. Adrian didn't go back to work that day. He drove around the city for 2 hours, his mind spinning, the phone call with Victoria replaying over and over until the words lost meaning. When he finally pulled into the daycare parking lot, it was almost 5, and Emma was one of the last kids waiting. She ran to him the moment she saw him, her arms outstretched, her face breaking into that smile that always made everything else fade away. Daddy! He scooped her up, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like crayons and apple juice and innocence. Hey, baby girl, you have a good day? She nodded, already chattering about the puzzle she'd finished, and the boy who'd taken her snack but then given it back. Adrian carried her to the truck, strapped her in, and drove home on autopilot. That night, he made her dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, her favorite, and sat with her at the small kitchen table while she ate. She was telling him a story about a caterpillar she'd seen on the playground, her words tumbling over each other in excitement, and Adrian realized he wasn't hearing any of it. His mind was somewhere else, with Victoria, with the reporters, with the impossible choice he was facing. Daddy? He blinked. Yes, sweetheart? You sad? The question hit him like a punch. No, baby, I'm just tired. Emma studied him with those big knowing eyes that saw too much for a 2-year-old. Then she climbed down from her chair, walked over, and wrapped her small arms around his leg. It's okay, Daddy. Adrian's throat tightened. He picked her up and held her close, and for a moment he let himself just feel it. The weight of her, the trust, the unconditional love that didn't care about money or status, or what the world thought of him. I love you so much, he whispered. Love you too. He put her to bed an hour later, reading the constellation book Victoria had given them until Emma's eyes drooped shut. Then he sat in the living room, staring at his phone, trying to find the courage to call her back. But he didn't, because he didn't know what to say. But Victoria didn't sleep that night. She stood at the windows of her penthouse, looking out at the city, replaying the conversation with Adrian until her chest felt like it was caving in. She'd done it again, pushed someone away before they could leave. It was easier that way, cleaner, less painful, or at least that's what she told herself. But it didn't feel easier. It felt like she was suffocating. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from her assistant. Board meeting moved to 8 a.m. tomorrow. Pierce wants to talk strategy. Victoria didn't respond. She set the phone down and pressed her palms against the cold glass, trying to ground herself. The problem was that she'd let herself hope. She'd let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have something real. Something that wasn't transactional or calculated or tied to the company's bottom line. And now she was paying the price. Her phone rang. Not her assistant this time. Her brother. She almost didn't answer, but guilt made her pick up. What? Well, hello to you too. Daniel's voice was light, teasing. I saw the news. You've been holding out on me. I don't want to talk about it. Come on, Vic, you're dating someone. That's huge. When do I get to meet him? You don't. Why not? Is he that bad? He's not bad. He's... Victoria stopped herself, her voice catching. It's complicated. Daniel's tone shifted, concern creeping in. Are you okay? I'm fine. You don't sound fine. I said I'm fine, Daniel. Silence. Then quietly, you know you can talk to me, right? I'm not just your annoying little brother. I actually care about you. Victoria's eyes stung. I know. So talk to me. What's going on? She wanted to. She wanted to tell him everything. About Adrian, about Emma, about the reporters and the backlash and the way it felt like the walls were closing in. But the words wouldn't come. I can't do this right now, she said instead. Vic, I have to go. She hung up before he could argue. Then she sat down on the couch, pulled her knees to her chest, and let herself cry for the second time in as many weeks. The board meeting the next morning was a nightmare. Victoria walked into the conference room at 8 sharp, her expression carefully neutral, her armor back in place. The board members were already seated, 12 people who held the power to make or break her career with a single vote. Jonathan Pierce sat at the head of the table, his face grim. Victoria, thank you for joining us. Of course. She took her seat, setting her tablet in front of her. What's this about? Pierce exchanged a glance with the woman to his left, Margaret Chen, one of the company's oldest investors. We need to discuss the recent media coverage. Victoria's jaw tightened. It's a private matter. It doesn't affect the company. Doesn't it? Margaret leaned forward, her voice sharp. You're the face of this company, Victoria. Everything you do reflects on us. And right now you're making us look reckless. Reckless? Dating someone with no credentials, no status, no connections. Someone the media is painting as a gold digger. It raises questions about your judgment. Victoria's hands clenched under the table. My personal life has nothing to do with my ability to run this company. That's where you're wrong. Pierce's voice was quieter, but no less firm. Perception matters. And right now the perception is that you're distracted, that you're making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. That's ridiculous. Is it? Margaret pulled up something on her tablet and slid it across the table. Q3 projections are down. 2 major clients are reconsidering their contracts. Our stock has dropped 3 points since that article came out. Victoria stared at the numbers, her stomach sinking. That's a coincidence, or it's a pattern. Pierce folded his hands on the table. Look, Victoria, we're not trying to control your personal life, but you need to understand the position you're in. You're not just a CEO, you're a brand. And right now that brand is taking a hit. So what are you asking me to do? End it. Margaret's tone left no room for argument. Publicly, issue a statement, distance yourself from this man and get back to focusing on what matters. Victoria felt like she'd been slapped. You can't be serious. We're dead serious. Pierce's expression softened slightly. I know it's not what you want to hear, but you have a responsibility to this company, to the people who work here, to your father's legacy. The mention of her father was a low blow, and Pierce knew it. Victoria stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I need time to think. You have until Friday, Margaret said. After that, we're calling a vote.
A vote on what?
On whether you're still fit to lead this company. The words hung in the air like a threat. Victoria didn't respond. She walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking against the tile, and locked herself in her office. Then she screamed. Adrian didn't hear from Victoria for 3 days. He tried texting, calling, nothing. It was like she'd vanished. On the third day, he showed up at her office building again. The same assistant was there, but this time she didn't even let him pass the lobby. I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. Miss Hale has left strict instructions that she's not to be disturbed. I just need 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Adrian stood there, feeling the eyes of everyone in the lobby on him, and realized he was fighting a losing battle. He left. That night he got a text from Victoria. Just one line. I'm sorry. Adrian stared at the words, his chest tight, and typed back. For what? She didn't respond. And the breaking point came on Friday. Adrian was at the construction site trying to lose himself in the physical work when Rico came running over. Dude, you need to see this. Not now, Rico. No, seriously, turn on the news. Adrian followed him to the break room where a small TV was mounted in the corner. A handful of other guys were already gathered around, watching. The screen showed a press conference. Victoria stood at a podium, her expression cold and composed, cameras flashing around her. A chyron at the bottom read, Hale Tech CEO addresses personal controversy. Adrian's heart stopped. I want to address the recent speculation about my personal life, Victoria said, her voice steady. Over the past few weeks, there has been intense media scrutiny regarding my relationship with Adrian Cole. I want to make it clear that while Mr. Cole is a kind and decent person, our relationship was brief and is now over. I ask that the media respect his privacy and that of his family moving forward. Thank you. She stepped away from the podium, ignoring the barrage of questions from reporters. The screen cut to a news anchor. In a surprising turn, Victoria Hale has officially ended her relationship with Adrian Cole, the construction worker who became the center of media attention last month. Sources say the decision was made to protect Hale Tech's reputation amid growing investor concerns. Adrian couldn't hear the rest. The blood was rushing in his ears, his vision tunneling. Rico put a hand on his shoulder. Man, I'm sorry. Adrian shook him off and walked out. He got in his truck, drove to a parking lot, and sat there for an hour, staring at nothing. She'd done it. She'd ended it, publicly, without even talking to him first. And the worst part was, he understood why. But understanding didn't make it hurt any less. Victoria locked herself in her apartment for the weekend. She ignored calls from her assistant, from Pierce, from Daniel. She ignored the messages from reporters asking for follow-up comments. She ignored everything except the crushing weight of what she'd done. The press conference had been Margaret's idea. Clean break, she'd said. No ambiguity. Show the board you're serious about putting the company first. Victoria had agreed because she didn't have a choice. Not if she wanted to keep her position, not if she wanted to protect everything her father had built. But standing at that podium, saying those words, had felt like ripping her own heart out. She'd tried to text Adrian afterward, to explain, to apologize. But what was there to say? I chose my company over you. I chose my career over us. I'm sorry I'm exactly the person everyone warned you I'd be. So she said nothing, and now she was alone again. On Sunday night, Daniel showed up at her door. Go away, Victoria said through the intercom. Not happening. Let me up, or I'm making a scene in your lobby. She buzzed him in. Daniel took one look at her, unwashed hair, sweatpants, red-rimmed eyes, and pulled her into a hug. Jesus, Vic, what did they do to you? Nothing I didn't agree to. He steered her to the couch and sat down beside her. Tell me what happened. So she did. All of it. The board meeting, the ultimatum, the press conference, the way Adrian had looked at her the last time they'd spoken, like he knew she was about to break his heart. When she finished, Daniel was quiet for a long time. You know you didn't have to do that, right? He said finally. Yes, I did. No, you chose to. There's a difference. They were going to vote me out. So let them. Find another company, start your own, do literally anything except sacrifice the one good thing in your life for a bunch of people who don't actually care about you. Victoria laughed, but it came out bitter. It's not that simple. Why not? Because this company is all I have, Daniel. It's all I've ever had. If I lose it, you'd still have yourself. You'd still have the people who actually love you. He paused. You'd still have him. If you hadn't burned that bridge, Victoria's chest tightened. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You just made the one that felt safe. Daniel stood, heading for the door. But here's the thing, Vic. Safe isn't the same as right, and you know it. He left. Victoria sat alone in the silence, his words echoing in her head. Adrian tried to move on. He went back to work. He focused on Emma. He deleted every article, every photo, every reminder of Victoria from his phone. It didn't help. Emma asked about her a few days later, her small voice cutting through the quiet of bedtime. Where, Toria? Adrian's throat tightened. She's not coming around anymore, baby. Why? Because, she's busy. She come back? Adrian didn't know how to answer that. I don't know, sweetheart. Emma's face crumpled, and she started to cry. Not the loud theatrical tears of a tantrum, but the quiet, heartbroken kind that made Adrian feel like he was failing at everything. He held her until she fell asleep, her small body shaking with hiccups, and realized Victoria hadn't just broken his heart. She'd broken Emma's too. 2 weeks after the press conference, Adrian got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Adrian Cole? Yeah. My name is Rachel Morris. I'm an attorney. I represent Victoria Hale. Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? Ms. Hale wanted me to reach out to you regarding a financial matter. I don't want her money. This isn't about Mr. Cole. If you'd just let me explain. No. Whatever it is, the answer is no. Tell her to leave me alone. He hung up. The lawyer called back 3 more times. Adrian blocked the number. He didn't want Victoria's guilt money. He didn't want anything from her except the one thing she couldn't give him, herself. The 4th week after the press conference, Adrian was at the park with Emma. It was late afternoon, the sun starting to dip low, the playground mostly empty. Emma was on the swings, kicking her legs, when a voice behind him said, "She's gotten taller." Adrian turned. Victoria stood a few feet away, her hands shoved in the pockets of her coat, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked thinner than he remembered, tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. "What are you doing here?" His voice came out colder than he meant. "I needed to see you. You made it pretty clear you were done." "I know." She stepped closer, her expression pained. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you, but I need you to hear me out." "Why? So you can apologize and feel better about yourself?" "No, so I can tell you the truth." She took a breath. "The board gave me an ultimatum. End things with you or lose my position. And I chose the company because that's what I've always done. I've always chosen the safe thing. The thing that doesn't require me to be vulnerable or take a risk or trust that someone might actually stay." Adrian's chest ached. "So why are you here now?" "Because I was wrong." Her voice broke. "I was wrong, and I can't stop thinking about you, about Emma, about the way you made me feel like I was more than just a CEO or a brand or someone's idea of success. You made me feel human, and I threw that away because I was scared. Scared of what? Of losing everything, of being the failure everyone expected me to be." She wiped at her eyes, her composure cracking. "But I lost you anyway, so what was the point?" Adrian stared at her, his anger warring with the part of him that still ached for her. "You broke Emma's heart, Victoria. She cried for 3 days asking where you were." Victoria's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix it." "I know." She looked at him, her eyes red and desperate. "But I'm here anyway, because I need you to know that I'm done running. I'm done choosing the company over the people I love. I quit." Adrian blinked. "What?" "I quit. This morning. I walked into the board meeting and resigned. Told them they could keep the company, keep the legacy, keep all of it. I'm done." "Victoria, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't have a plan. I don't have anything figured out. But I know I can't keep living the way I was. And I know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. So I'm asking you, Adrian, please, give me another chance. Adrian looked at her, at the vulnerability in her eyes, the raw honesty of her words, and felt something shift in his chest. You really quit? Yes. For me? For me, but also for you, for us. Emma called out from the swings. Daddy, push! Adrian glanced at his daughter, then back at Victoria. This isn't going to be easy. I know. The media's still going to come after us. People are still going to talk. I don't care. And if you change your mind, I won't. She reached out, taking his hand. I'm all in, Adrian. If you'll have me. Adrian looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of her, the steadiness of her grip. And he made his choice. Okay. Victoria's eyes widened. Okay? Yeah. He pulled her closer. Okay. She kissed him then, right there in the middle of the park, and Adrian felt like he could finally breathe again. When they pulled apart, Emma was standing beside them, her face scrunched up in confusion. Victoria? Victoria crouched down, her eyes shining. Hi, Emma. Emma stared at her for a moment. Then she threw her arms around Victoria's neck, nearly knocking her over. You came back! Victoria held her tight, her voice choked. Yeah, sweetheart. I came back. And this time, she meant it. The first week after Victoria came back was chaos, not the kind Adrian had gotten used to. The media circus, the invasive questions, the constant feeling of being watched. This was different. This was the chaos of rebuilding something from wreckage, of figuring out what their lives looked like now that Victoria had walked away from everything she'd known. She stayed at a hotel the first few nights. Adrian offered his apartment, but she'd shaken her head. I need to do this right, she'd said. I need to not rush. But she showed up every evening at 6, like clockwork, and they'd go to the park with Emma. Sometimes they'd grab dinner after, cheap takeout that Victoria ate like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. They talked about everything and nothing. Victoria told him about the board's reaction when she'd resigned, shock, anger, a few thinly veiled accusations that she was throwing away her legacy out of spite. Adrian told her about the guys at work, how they'd stopped asking questions after he'd made it clear he didn't want to talk about it. Emma, for her part, acted like Victoria had never left. She dragged her around the playground, demanded piggyback rides, and insisted Victoria sit next to her during story time. And Victoria, who'd probably never spent more than 10 minutes around a child before Emma, looked terrified and thrilled in equal measure. On the 8th day, Victoria showed up at Adrian's apartment with 2 suitcases and a sheepish expression. The hotel kicked me out, she said. Adrian raised an eyebrow. How do you get kicked out of a hotel? I didn't get kicked out. I just stopped paying. It seemed wasteful. She looked past him into the apartment. Can I stay here, just until I figure out where I'm going? Adrian stepped aside. Yeah, of course. She moved into his tiny apartment, and it was immediately clear how different their worlds had been. Victoria didn't know how to work the ancient coffee maker. She'd never seen a toaster that required you to manually push the lever down. She opened the fridge the first morning, stared at the contents, mostly condiments and leftover mac and cheese, and looked genuinely lost. We need groceries, she said. I know, I usually go on Sundays. It's Tuesday. Yeah, well, I've been a little distracted. Victoria closed the fridge and turned to face him. Teach me. Teach you what? How to do this. How to live like a normal person. She gestured around the apartment. I don't know how, Adrian. I've had people do everything for me my entire life. I don't know how to grocery shop or cook or any of it. Adrian stared at her for a moment, then he started laughing. What? Victoria demanded. Nothing. It's just, you ran $1 billion company, but you can't make toast. Her cheeks flushed. It's not funny. It's a little funny. Shut up. He pulled her into a kiss and she melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Okay, he said. I'll teach you. Go on. They went grocery shopping that afternoon, Emma in the cart, Victoria pushing it like she was steering a spaceship. She stopped at every aisle, reading labels, asking questions about things Adrian had been buying his entire life without thinking about. Why is this cereal $4 and this one is $2.50? Because one's name brand and one's not. But they're the same thing. Pretty much. She put the cheaper one in the cart, looking oddly proud of herself. At the register, the total came to $63. Victoria pulled out her wallet. Still expensive, still designer, one of the few things she'd kept from her old life, and handed over cash without blinking. The cashier looked at the $100 bill, then at Victoria, and something flickered in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or just curiosity. "Keep the change," Victoria said. Adrian put his hand over hers. "You don't tip grocery store cashiers." "Oh." Victoria looked mortified. "Sorry." The cashier smiled. "It's fine, hun. Happens all the time." They loaded the groceries into Adrian's truck, and Victoria sat in the passenger seat looking dazed. "That was exhausting," she said. "That was shopping. How do people do that every week? Because they have to." Adrian glanced at her. "You okay?" "Yeah, I didn't realize how much I didn't know." "You'll learn." She looked at him, and something in her expression softened. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not making me feel stupid." Adrian reached over and took her hand. "You're not stupid. You're just learning. There's a difference." "What?" The media didn't let up, but it changed. The narrative shifted from gold digger scandal to billionaire CEO walks away from empire for love. Some outlets painted it as romantic. Others called it reckless, a cautionary tale about letting emotions cloud judgment. Victoria stopped reading the articles after the first few days. "It doesn't matter what they say," she told Adrian one night, lying in his bed. Their bed now, even though it was too small for two people, and the springs creaked every time they moved. "I made my choice. Do you regret it?" She turned to face him in the dark. "No." "Do you regret letting me back in?" "No." "Not even a little?" Adrian thought about it. About the weeks of hell they'd gone through, the reporters, the scrutiny, the way Emma had cried when Victoria left. About the risk they were taking now, building something that had already been torn apart once. "Not even a little," he said. Victoria kissed him, and they stayed like that until Emma's voice cut through the quiet. "Daddy, I'm thirsty," Adrian groaned. "Of course you are." Victoria laughed and pushed him out of bed. "Go. I'll still be here when you get back." And she was. 3 weeks after Victoria moved in, she got a call from Jonathan Pierce. Adrian was at work, and Victoria was at the apartment with Emma, attempting to make grilled cheese without burning it. Her phone rang, and she saw Pierce's name on the screen. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Hello?" "Victoria, it's Jonathan." "I know. I wanted to reach out, see how you're doing." Victoria flipped the sandwich, watching it carefully. "I'm fine. Are you?" "Yes," Pierce sighed. "Look, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but I've been thinking about what you said, about the board, about the pressure we put on you, and I want to apologize." Victoria paused, the spatula hovering over the pan. "You're apologizing?" "I am. We pushed you too hard. We treated you like a machine instead of a person, and I'm sorry for that." Victoria didn't know what to say. She'd spent weeks being angry at Pierce, at the board, at the entire system that had demanded she sacrifice her life for the company. But now, hearing the regret in his voice, the anger felt hollow. "Thank you," she said finally. "I also wanted to let you know that the company's moving forward. We hired a new CEO. Someone from outside, fresh perspective." "That's good?" "It is. But it's not the same without you." Victoria looked at Emma, who was sitting on the floor playing with blocks, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "I don't think I'm the same person I was, Jonathan. I can tell. And for what it's worth, I think this version of you is better." Victoria's throat tightened. "I have to go. The grilled cheese is burning." Pierce chuckled. "Of course. Take care, Victoria." "You too." She hung up and pulled the sandwich off the pan just in time. It was a little too dark on one side, but Emma didn't seem to care. She ate it with enthusiasm, cheese smeared across her face, and Victoria felt something settle in her chest. This was enough. This was more than enough. What? A month after Victoria moved in, Adrian came home from work to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a laptop and a stack of papers. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his tool belt. "Research." Victoria didn't look up. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next. Like a job? Maybe. Or maybe something else, I don't know yet. She finally looked at him, her expression uncertain. I've been running a company since I was 22. I don't know how to do anything else. Adrian pulled out a chair and sat down beside her. What do you want to do? I don't know. Then start there. Not what you're good at. Not what makes sense. What do you actually want? Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then, hesitantly, she said, I want to build something, but not a company. Something smaller, something that helps people. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Adrian kissed the top of her head. You will. 2 months after Victoria moved in, Adrian took her to meet his mother. It was a Sunday, and they drove out to the suburbs where Adrian had grown up. His mom still lived in the same house, a small ranch-style place with a garden out front and a porch that sagged slightly on one side. Adrian hadn't told his mom much about Victoria, just that he was seeing someone and wanted her to meet Emma's new favorite person. His mom, to her credit, hadn't pushed for details. But the moment they pulled into the driveway, Adrian saw the curtain twitch. She's been waiting for us, he muttered. Victoria looked nervous. What if she doesn't like me? She'll like you. How do you know? Because Emma loves you, and my mom trusts Emma's judgment more than mine. Victoria laughed, but it sounded shaky. They walked up to the porch, Emma holding both their hands, and the door swung open before they could knock. Adrian's mom was a small woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Victoria for a long moment, taking in the designer jeans and the nervous expression, and then she smiled. You must be Victoria. Yes, ma'am. It's nice to meet you. None of that ma'am stuff. Call me Karen. She stepped aside. Come in, come in. I made lasagna. The house smelled like garlic and tomatoes, and it hit Adrian with a wave of nostalgia so strong he had to stop for a second. They ate in the dining room, Emma chattering away about everything and nothing, while Karen asked Victoria polite questions. Where she was from, what she did, how she'd met Adrian. Victoria answered carefully, leaving out the parts about the billion-dollar company and the media circus. But Karen wasn't fooled. I read about you, you know, she said halfway through the meal. After Adrian mentioned your name, I looked you up. Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, you gave up a lot to be here. I gave up a job. That's not nothing. Victoria set down her fork, meeting Karen's gaze. It was nothing compared to what I would have lost if I'd stayed. Karen studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good answer. After dinner, Karen pulled Adrian aside while Victoria helped Emma wash her hands. She's good for you, his mom said quietly. Yeah, she is. You're good for her too. I can see it. Karen squeezed his arm. Don't let her go. I won't. When they left a few hours later, Emma asleep in the back seat, Victoria was quiet. Your mom's amazing, she said finally. She likes you. How do you know? Because she hugged you goodbye. She doesn't do that for just anyone. Victoria smiled, and Adrian reached over to take her hand. What? 3 months after Victoria moved in, Adrian came home to find her crying. She was sitting on the couch, her laptop open in front of her, tears streaming down her face. Adrian dropped everything and crossed the room in 3 strides. What happened? Are you okay? Victoria looked up at him, and to his shock, she was smiling through the tears. I got approved. Approved for what? A grant from a nonprofit foundation. They're funding my project. Adrian sat down beside her. What project? Victoria wiped her eyes, laughing a little. I've been working on this idea. A program that provides free business training and resources to single parents trying to start their own businesses. Mentorship, funding, childcare support, all of it. She looked at him, her eyes shining. I wanted to do something that mattered, something that helped people like you. Adrian's chest tightened. Victoria, I know it's not a billion-dollar company. I know it's small, but it's mine, and it's real. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I'm so proud of you. She clung to him, and they stayed like that until Emma wandered in, rubbing her eyes. Why you crying, Toria? Victoria laughed and wiped her face. I'm happy, sweetheart. Emma climbed onto the couch between them. Happy crying? Yeah, happy crying. Emma seemed satisfied with that and curled up against Victoria's side. Adrian looked at the two of them, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt something click into place. This was his family now, and it was perfect in all its messy, complicated, beautiful imperfection. 6 months after Victoria moved in, they had their first real fight. It started over something stupid. Adrian had forgotten to pick up milk on his way home, and Victoria had snapped at him about it. He'd snapped back, and suddenly they were yelling about everything they'd been holding in for months, about the cramped apartment and the lack of privacy, and the way they were still figuring out how to fit their lives together. "I gave up everything for this," Victoria shouted. "And you can't even remember to buy milk?" "I'm doing the best I can," Adrian fired back. "I'm sorry I'm not perfect, Victoria. I'm sorry I can't give you the life you're used to." "That's not what I—" She stopped, her face crumpling. "That's not what I meant." They stood there, breathing hard, and then Victoria started crying again. "I don't care about the milk," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't care about any of it. I'm just scared." Adrian's anger drained away. "Scared of what?" "That you're going to wake up one day and realize I'm not worth it, that this isn't enough." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "You are worth it. You're worth all of it." "How do you know?" "Because I love you." It was the first time he'd said it out loud. The words hung between them, heavy and true. Victoria pulled back, looking at him with wide eyes. "You do?" "Yeah, I do. I love you too." She said it like a confession, like she'd been holding it in for too long. "I love you so much, it terrifies me." Adrian kissed her, and the fight dissolved into nothing. Later that night, lying in bed, Victoria said, "We should get a bigger place." Adrian laughed. "We can't afford a bigger place." "I have money saved, from before. We could—" "No." "Adrian, I'm not living off your money, Victoria. It's not living off my money. It's us building a life together. Isn't that what we're doing?" Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Okay, but we split it, 50-50. "That's not 50-50, or no deal," Victoria sighed. "You're stubborn. You're one to talk." She laughed and kissed him. "Fine, 50-50. A year after Victoria came back, they moved into a new apartment. It was still small, still modest by Victoria's old standards, but it had 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that didn't feel like a closet. Emma got her own room, which she decorated with Victoria's help, dinosaur posters and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Adrian kept working construction, but he'd started taking night classes again, architecture. It was slow going, and some nights he was so exhausted he could barely keep his eyes open. But Victoria quizzed him on terminology and helped him with drafting assignments. And little by little, the dream he'd shelved started coming back to life. Victoria's nonprofit took off faster than she'd expected. She worked from home most days, coordinating with mentors and applicants, watching the program grow from an idea into something tangible. She told Adrian stories about the people she was helping, single moms starting bakeries, dads launching landscaping businesses, and the pride in her voice made his chest ache. They weren't rich. They weren't living some fairy tale where everything magically worked out. They fought sometimes. They struggled. They had days where Adrian came home too tired to talk and Victoria was too stressed to be patient. Days where Emma threw tantrums and the apartment felt too small and the bills felt too big. But they had each other. And that was enough. 18 months after Victoria came back, Adrian proposed. It wasn't fancy. There was no elaborate plan, no expensive ring. He'd been saving for months, and the ring he bought was simple. A small diamond on a thin band, nothing like the kind of jewelry Victoria used to wear. They were at the park, the same park where they'd met, where Emma had given Victoria that first rock. Emma was on the swings, and Victoria was sitting beside him on the bench, her head resting on his shoulder. "I've been thinking," Adrian said. "About what?" "About how you gave up everything to be here. Your company, your money, your whole life." Victoria lifted her head. "I don't regret it. I know, but I want you to know that I see it. I see what you sacrificed, and I want to give you something in return. Adrian, you don't have to—" He pulled the ring from his pocket and held it up. "I want to give you my life. For real. Officially. Will you marry me?" Victoria stared at the ring, her eyes filling with tears. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "That's the ugliest proposal I've ever heard." Adrian laughed. I'm a construction worker, not a poet. I don't care. She threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him off the bench. Yes, 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 yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Emma came running over, demanding to know what they were doing, and when they told her, she screamed with excitement and insisted on being the flower girl immediately. They stayed at the park until the sun set, the three of them together, and Adrian realized something. Happiness wasn't about money or status or having everything figured out. It was about this, about choosing someone every day, even when it was hard, about building something real, something honest, something worth fighting for. It was about love. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Karen's house, just family and a few close friends. Emma wore a white dress and took her role as flower girl very seriously, scattering petals with intense concentration while the guests tried not to laugh. Victoria wore a simple dress, cream-colored, nothing extravagant, and she cried through the entire ceremony. Adrian cried too, and he didn't care who saw. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Emma cheered louder than anyone. The reception was in the backyard with folding tables and homemade food and a playlist Adrian had put together on his phone. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left, Adrian found Victoria sitting on the porch steps, looking out at the yard where Emma was chasing fireflies with one of his cousins. He sat down beside her. "You okay?" "Yeah, I keep thinking about where I was a year ago. Alone in that apartment, convinced I'd ruined my life." She looked at him. "And now I'm here, married, happy. It doesn't feel real." "It's real. I know, but I keep waiting for something to go wrong." Adrian took her hand. "Things will go wrong. That's life. But we'll figure it out, together." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you. I love you too." They sat there in the fading light, watching Emma play, and Adrian realized something else. This was it. This was the life he'd been working toward his whole life, even when he didn't know what it looked like. And it was everything. 2 years after they got married, Victoria's nonprofit had grown into something bigger than she'd ever imagined. They'd helped over 200 families start businesses, and the success stories kept rolling in. She'd been interviewed by local news stations, invited to speak at conferences, even offered positions on several boards. She turned them all down. "I'm done with boards," she told Adrian. "I'm done with corporate anything. This is what I want to do." Adrian had graduated from his night program and landed an internship at a small architecture firm. It didn't pay much yet, but he was learning, growing, getting closer to the dream he'd thought was lost forever. Emma was 5 now, in kindergarten, thriving. She still asked Victoria to read the constellation book at bedtime, and she still called her Toria, and Victoria still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. One night, after putting Emma to bed, Victoria came into the living room where Adrian was working on sketches for a residential project. "I have something to tell you," she said. Adrian looked up. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. She sat down beside him, her hands twisting in her lap. "I'm pregnant." Adrian's pencil fell from his hand. "What?" "I'm pregnant, about 8 weeks." He stared at her, his brain trying to catch up. "We're having a baby?" "Yes." "Holy shit," Victoria laughed. "That's what I said." Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and felt something break open in his chest. Joy. Pure, overwhelming joy. "Are you happy?" Victoria asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Are you kidding? He pulled back to look at her. "I'm terrified and thrilled, and I can't believe this is happening." "Me too." They told Emma the next morning, and she was ecstatic. She immediately started planning what she was going to teach her little brother or sister, which mostly involved dinosaurs and how to find the best rocks at the park. The pregnancy was hard. Victoria was sick for the first 3 months, exhausted for the next 3, and uncomfortable for the final 3. But Adrian was there for all of it, holding her hair when she threw up, rubbing her feet when they ached, talking to her belly late at night when she couldn't sleep. Their son was born on a rainy afternoon in April, screaming his lungs out, his tiny fists waving in the air like he was ready to fight the world. They named him Daniel, after Victoria's brother, And when Adrian held him for the first time, looking down at that small, perfect face, he thought about how far they'd come. From a spilled coffee in a crowded cafe to this, to a family, to a life neither of them had planned, but both of them had chosen. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was all they'd ever needed. 5 years after Victoria came back to the park, they were still there. Emma was 9 now, too cool for the playground, but still willing to hang out if her parents promised to be embarrassing. Daniel was 3, fearless and loud, and already showing signs of the same stubbornness his sister had. Victoria's nonprofit had expanded to 3 cities. Adrian had his own small firm now, designing affordable housing for families like the one he'd grown up in. They still lived modestly. They still fought sometimes. They still had moments where the weight of everything felt too heavy. But they had each other. And on this particular evening, sitting on that same bench while their kids played, Victoria turned to Adrian and said, "I don't think I've ever been this happy." Adrian looked at her, at the woman who'd walked away from a fortune to build a life with him, who'd chosen love over power, who'd proven every day that she was exactly who he needed her to be. "Me neither," he said. And he meant it. Because happiness wasn't about having everything. It was about having enough. It was about choosing someone every single day and building something that mattered. It was about love that didn't quit, even when things got hard. It was about this.